Please.
Everybody.
Yes, sir. Please start, sir.
My senior colleagues and my friends and dear students. I am going to give a talk on specimens and bones this evening on behalf of ACPM Medical College, which is situated in Dhule. Probably you may not be knowing where is the Dhule, the place is. It is a tribal area, tribal district situated in the north of Maharashtra at the junction of border of Gujarat, Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh. At the outside, I am very much thankful to Dr. Gopal Shinde sir for allowing me to give this speech on behalf of the joint family. Secondly, I must apologize for not participating regularly in this class because of predetermined clinical commitments. Actually, this class should be divided into two. One is in the specimens and second in bones. Last year, when I gave this talk, I gave two talks. But this time, Shinde sir requested me to club both the together and try to finish in one lecture. So I will try to finish it. I might be little fast. Please bear with me. So the first lecture will be on the specimens. The student should identify the specimen. He should identify the part of the bone, should describe the specimen from within outwards, like whether appearances like uniform or variegated, the color, start with the medullary cavity, cortex, periosteum, soft tissue infiltration. And if there are areas of hemorrhage, necrosis, newborn formation or destruction, and try to find out whether the tumor is benign or malignant. Then the question may be asked on microscopy picture, clinical picture, radiological features, other investigations, and possible treatment for that particular specimens. The further questions will depend upon the performance of a candidate, which is given to the questions and the clinical cases. I'm sure our colleagues or most of the examiners will agree with me. The result of the candidate is decided on the clinical cases. And the tables, including specimen and bones, they are additional finding. So if the examiner is naughty, he may ask you regarding the preparation of the specimen. So you should know how to prepare the specimen. It needs acrylic container with glass rod or frame, needle and cotton threads for mounting, and preserving solution. Preserving solution, for 1 liter of preserving solution, we need 900 ml of water, 100 ml of 10% formalin solution. The formalin acts as a fixative disinfectant. It preserves the tissues by stabilizing proteins. It prevents both autolysis and putrefaction of the tissue. Then 10 ml of glycerol. It prevents the desiccation of the tissue. And then 10 gram of salt. It prevents decomposition and preserves the specimen. This is the basic which is seen in any pathology department. Then comes to the proper specimen. The first is of infection. This is the chronic osteomyelitis. This is the specimen which shows sequestrum and emelochron. So sequestrum is a ivory white brittle piece of bone free from parent bone in the cavity. And on this side, you can see the sequestrum, emelochron, and this is the cloacae. Examiner may ask you about the definition and types of sequestrum, which candidate should know because this is a very common problem in our country. So there are various types like tubular sequestrum, which is seen in the long bones, diaphyseal affection of chronic osteomyelitis. This is the tubular sequestrum. Then the ring sequestrum, which is classically seen around the amputation stump or maybe in the at the site and exit of the Steinmann pin. Feathery sequestrum is classically seen in the osteomyelitis of the flat bones. Sandy sequestrum in cancellous bone. Bombay sequestrum, also called as pigmented sequestrum, and ivory sequestrum. Then certain peculiarities of the sequestrum one should know. It's a dense white color because it doesn't have periosteum. The shape is not definite. It has got irregular margins because it is actively separated from the parent bone by granulation tissue. There is no periosteum and it's brittle inconsistency. That's why sequestrum holding forceps doesn't have a catch. Then examiner may ask you about indication of sequestrectomy. So it depends on the size. If the size is very small, it can be discharged through the cloacae or it can be absorbed in the body. It should be very well separated from the parent bone and enough invotropum should be formed. Otherwise, the patient will develop pathological fracture. And these are the certain specimens. This is the chronic osteomyelitis tibia, and you can see the sequestrum is coming out of the bone. This is the real specimen. And this is hyperpigmentation of the skin, which indicates the chronicity of the disease. Then this is the another specimen which showing the sequestrum coming out through the femur. This is the osteomyelitis of the femur. There is a puckering of the sinus, and the active sinus is present. And this is the sequestrum actually, which is removed from the femur. It is pigmented and partly it looks a little pink. Histopathologically, there is an inflammatory exudate, which is seen here. Then there is a dead bone, and there are osteoclasts. This is the X-ray picture, which showing sequestrum and immunochrome. There's a ring sequestrum here. Then the next specimen of the mother of foot. This is the specimen of the foot, which shows the multiple sinuses in different stages of development. Some of them are nodules, some of them are pustule formations, some of them are discharging sinuses, some of them are hill sinuses. The skin between the sinuses is indurated, and basically this subcutaneous tissue affection. There's a hyperpigmentation and soft tissue involvement, and bones are secondarily involved. This specimen shows the gross sulfur granules. This is another specimen of mother of foot showing extensive swelling of the foot, multiple sinuses, and discharging color granules like red, yellow, white, or black granules. There is the scarring of this tissue and discoloration of the skin. And this is how you can collect the granules from the discharging sinus. Sometimes examiner may ask you differential diagnosis. So there are two differential diagnoses which are very common in tuberculosis and chronic osteomyelitis. In tuberculosis, the sinuses and ulcers shows the serous discharge and undermined skin. While in chronic osteomyelitis, sinuses are fixed to the bone and they show the sprouting type of granulation tissue that indicates that the sequestrum is present deep in the cavity. High power view shows the brown granules, necrosis, and inflammatory exudate. There are two types of treatment: medical treatment and surgical treatment. When only the soft tissues are involved, one can try different types of medical drugs, but the patient doesn't respond, then you can go for the excision of sinuses and affected tissue. If the bones are involved, then amputation is the only choice of treatment. This is the X-ray picture of mother of foot showing multiple punched out lesions. Then the next specimen of the tuberculosis of spine, which shows the collapse, showing the destruction of the intervertebral disc, destruction of the vertebra, and kyphotic deformity. Obviously, the question will be asked on what are the different types of kyphotic deformities and what is the clinical picture of the patient. This is another specimen showing the collapse of vertebra when there are multiple vertebrae involved, which showing the severe kyphosis and possible cord damage. Histopathologically, it shows a caesation, central caesation surrounded by the epithelioid cells and Langerhans type of joint cell. This is the Langerhans type of joint cells where the nuclei are situated in the peripheral part of the joint cell. X-ray shows reduced disc space and paradiscal destruction. When there is a central type of lesion, you see the concertina type of collapse. These are the different types of lesion. One is the paradiscal, this is the central, this is the anterior type, this is the posterior type. We know that blood supply of the vertebral column, and we know that the tuberculosis of the bone is always secondary to some primary focus situated elsewhere in the body, and the spread is always by the hematogenous route. And that's why when the spine is involved, you get a commonest lesion, the paradiscal, the inferior part of the upper vertebra and superior part of the lower vertebra. They are basically involved in paradiscal type of tuberculosis. So once the typical tubercle follicle develops, then the destruction of the laminae, compression of the vertebral body, giving rise to exudative or adhesive type of reaction, and that forms the cold abscess. Now this cold abscess travels along the different anatomical planes, like lines of least resistance, like facial planes, blood vessels, and nerves. Management in good old area. The diagnosis was basically done by the clinical and radiological pictures, and the treatment was medical drugs and spinal basis in the early stage. In late stages, surgical treatment was advised. Dr. S.M. Tulip popularized his region that is called as middle path region. But currently, current treatment is that you must get the tissue or pus for gram stain and gene sustaining. Culture and sensitivity, you must send it for the gene express studies to decide whether the bacilli are MDR or normal. You must get the histopathological report also. Once you get a confirmation of the diagnosis, if the disease is early, you can treat it by the medical treatment. If the disease is late with a lot of destruction, the radical surgical treatment with appropriate instrumentation is done. The next specimen is of avascular necrosis of femoral head. Normally, you can see the normal femoral head with a intact articular cartilage and subchondral bone, which is very well vascularized. But in avascular necrosis, the cartilage, articular cartilage is lifted off the bone, and there's a fracture through the subchondral bone. Then the high power view of this avascular necrosis shows articular cartilage and bone showing living cartilage and necrotic subchondral bone. That is a normal. But here you see the islands of dead and empty osteolytic like unit. The possible questions will be, what are the causes of AVN, different types of management, classification of AVN, which is based on MRI. So you should know all those things. The next specimen of pigmented willow node synovitis. This is the orthoscopic view. Shows a chocolate colored mass on fibrous connective tissue with rubbery consistency. This is the gross pathology, which resembles fine sponge rubber, gray and yellow pale color. X-ray of PVNS shows lytic lesion, bony erosion, and degenerative changes. MRI shows effusion with intra-articular and intraosseous masses that are dark in T1 and T2 weighted images. This is the intraoperative picture of pre-synovectomy. Synovium is thickened and there are nodule formation also. This is the post-synovectomy picture, and this is the synovial membrane, which is excised. There are different nodules and loose bodies. Histopathologically, there are 4 types of cells. One is a synovial proliferation. Second is a xanthomatous cells accumulation. Third is hemosiderin deposition. And fourth is the multinucleated giant cells. Clinical feature is of any chronic synovitis with palpable villi and nodules. Treatment is synovectomy, either orthoscopic or open. If it recurs, radiotherapy is the treatment. Then the bone tumors, the diagnosis of bone tumors depend on the age, bone affected, location in the bone, radiology, and gross microscopic picture. This is the classification of bone tumors, which I'm not going to go in details. Now we'll straightway go to the malignant bone tumors. The first tumor is the osteosarcoma. This is the specimen of the femur showing big, bulky, grayish white, gritty swelling, areas of hemorrhages, cystic degenerations are present. It spreads to the cortex, medulla, epiphysis, joint space, and soft tissue. This is another specimen of osteosarcoma of lower end of femur showing the Codman's triangle and upper end of humerus showing infiltrative growth. This is another specimen of osteosarcoma proximal femur, which shows a large tumor arising from the metaphyseal region of proximal femur. The cortex is breached and there is a permeation into the medullary cavity. The tumor looks fleshy, shows areas of hemorrhage and cystic degeneration. Histopathologically, it shows pleomorphic tumor cells, tumor osteoid, and tumor giant cells. This is a microscopic picture showing tumor pleomorphic tumor cells with large hyperchromatic nuclei. Then tumor osteoid, which is very, very important for the diagnosis. It looks eosinophilic, glassy, irregular in contour with rim of tumor cells. And third cell is the bizarre tumor giant cells. This is a high power view of pleomorphic spindle cells on osteoid. The spindle cells are high grade of hypercellularity, abundant mitotic figures, marked pleoporphyrin and malignant osteoid. Histologically, there are three types: osteoblastic, chondroblastic, and fibroblastic, depending on which element is involved. Osteoblastic, the specimen looks yellowish, chondroblastic looks bluish, and fibroblastic it looks white. However, malignant osteoid by tumor cells should be seen to make a diagnosis of osteosarcoma. This is the radiological picture showing metaphyseal destruction, Codman's triangle, cellular appearance, and soft tissue infiltration. Radiologically, it could be mixed lytic or blastic lesion. There is a cortical destruction, Codman's triangle may be seen. Treatment, you have to decide the stage of the disease, and depending upon you should plan it. But in general, preoperative chemotherapy, wide surgical resection, limb salvage surgery, where you can excise the tumor and replace it with the prosthesis. With this treatment, 5-year survival rate is 60 to 80% with combined treatment. This is the probably lifetime specimen of any orthopedic surgeon. I don't know the senior orthopedic surgeon in the faculty, whether they've seen this or not. This is the effect of corona pandemic, which is not very good for this patient. This is the 23-year male who had a small swelling in the distal femur. He's very poor economically, financially, and socially also. He had been to Tata just before the pandemic. He received 3 chemotherapy cycles and he was supposed to undergo limb salvage surgery. But because of lockdown and pandemic, corona pandemic period, he could not travel to Mumbai. He remained in his village in home and didn't seek any medical treatment. So when he came to us in our hospital last month, this was the size of the tumor. It's a huge malignant tumor extending from the knee to the hip joint, showing multiple tortuous dilated veins. There's a foot drop and there is a variegated consistency at places. It's a soft, firm, and hard. This is the X-ray picture, which shows the sundry appearance and cross destruction, Codman's triangle also. Our management was very kind and we decided to treat it this as free of cost. So preoperative CT abdomen did not reveal any metastasis. HRCT showed micrometastasis. So we decided to go for the disarticulation of the hip joint, which was performed by myself. And this is the tumor. And this is the cut section of the tumor. And these are the two views. This is bulky, grayish white, and pretty hard. It's very hard. It was very hard. We could not. We broke 3 saws to cut this bone. So this is the Codman's triangle which is seen. There's a pathological fracture. There's a soft tissue infiltration. Uh, there's a sunray appearance is seen. There's a areas of hemorrhage and necrosis. Histopathology, it shows malignant tumor cells synthesizing the bone. Neoplastic cells with marked atopia. This is the tumor state. Once the wound has healed, just 2 days ago, we have shifted this patient to Mumbai in the Tata Hospital for further chemotherapy or possible treatment. Hopefully, he should get better. The next specimen of paraosteal osteosarcoma. It occurs in the 60% of the lower end of the femur, slightly older or broader age group. It's a well-defined tumor arising from the posterior surface of the femur. It arises from the cortex. There's no medullary canal involvement, no soft tissue involvement. It's a low-grade tumor and very slowly growing. On cut section, on X-ray and MRI scan, it shows a lobulated osteoid mass. Microscopically, it shows slightly atypical spindle cells and collagen fibers with embedded normal appearing bony trabeculae. The next specimen of Ewing sarcoma. This is the specimen of the proximal femur. It arises from the medullary canal of metadiaphyseal junction. There's a well-defined growth involving medulla and cortex. There is areas of hemorrhage and necrosis. This is another specimen of Ewing sarcoma of the proximal humerus, showing tumor arising from the metaphyseal diaphyseal region of the humerus. There's extensive invasion of the medullary bone with destruction of the endosteal and cortex. There's a grayish white tissue mass with areas of hemorrhage and necrosis. Microscopically, there's solid chips of uniform small round blue cells. That's why it is also called as small round blue cell sarcoma. The cytoplasm is scanty, nuclear indentation has small nuclei present. Necrosis may be prominent, and because of presence of glycogen, it is a fast positive. Clinically, patient has got pain, swelling, fever. ESR could be raised, CRP could be raised, increased WBC count. This is classically seen in early stage. Most of the time, it may mix with the osteomyelitis. So you have to keep the diagnosis of osteomyelitis in mind, or other way around. If you get a patient with chronic subacute osteomyelitis, you must keep the diagnosis of Ewing sarcoma in mind. That's why biopsy should be done. It shouldn't be hidden for the culture and histopathological examination. Radiologically, it shows onion pill appearance, and this is the treatment. 5 years survival combined with combined aggressive therapy is 60 to 80%. This is another specimen which is sent by one of my student, Dr. Abhijit Sarunke, who is working on as an ortho-oncosurgeon in Ahmedabad. And he had a patient with Ewing sarcoma of proximal tibia, 11 years old girl, and he excised the tumor and replaced with the indigenous minimally invasive mechanism of expansion prosthesis. This is the preoperative picture and post-op picture, and this is the prosthesis. The next specimen of chondrosarcoma. This is the lobulated chondroid tumor, pearly white in appearance, light blue in color, with focal calcification and small cystic lesions. Another specimen of chondrosarcoma, the proximal humerus. The age group is around 30 to 70 years. Mainly bones which are affected are flat and long bones, mainly in the metaphyseal location. There are areas of white shiny hyaline cartilage, erosion of the cortex, extension into the medulla and into the soft tissue. And there are areas of hemorrhages are also present. Radiologically, there is an endosteal scalloping with different types of calcification like annular, punctate, popcorn, or comma-shaped stipple calcification. This could be expansion of the medullary cavity. Perosteal reaction is absent. Soft tissue mass may be present. Extent of endosteal scalloping and pattern calcification may be indicative of high-grade chondrosarcoma. Microscopically, there are two types of cells. One is anaplastic cartilage cells with cartilaginous matrix, and second is the pleomorphism and tumor giant cells, which are seen in this slide. Treatment, you have to decide whether it's low grade or high grade. Low grade chondrosarcoma, extended curettage and adjuvant therapy. High grade, wide and radical resection or amputation. This chondrosarcoma is resistant to chemotherapy and radiotherapy. 10-year survival rate is 90% in low grade and 20 to 40% in high grade. The next specimen is of multiple myeloma. The commonest age group which is affected about 40 years, and the bones which are present in this age group, the bones which are containing red bone marrow, they are commonly affected, like the skull bones, ribs, vertebrae, or pelvic bone. The lesions are multiple or solitary. They are gelatinous, soft, and red masses. Microscopically, it shows appearance of the multiple myeloma with sheets of plasma cells. And high-power view shows the plasma cells, small round blue cells with clock-faced nuclei, abundant cytoplasm with perinuclear halo. This is very classically seen in this way. Investigation increased Benzoic proteins, and the most important, the raised serum globulins. This is the normal electrophoresis. This is of a normal person, where albumin is only raised, while alpha 1 beta 2 beta and gamma globulins are not that raised. But in multiple myeloma, these alpha 1 and alpha 2 globulins and beta globulins and gamma globulins are raised, and that's why it gives rise to the protein M band in the protein electrophoresis pattern. This is the diagnostic. Treatment consists of chemotherapy, steroid, novel therapeutics, stem cell transplantation, radiotherapy, surgery for fixation of pathological fractures, or spinal decompression in the inner throat paraplegia. But whatever you do, most patients die within 3 years. The next specimen of giant cell tumor or osteoclastoma is the epiphyseal tumor, which is showing the large red-brown cystic degeneration. Another specimen shows expansile lesion of the distal femur, showing eggshell crackling. Another X-ray showing giant cell tumor with epiphyseal location. That's why it is also called as tumor sitting in the corner, and slowly it's enlarged towards the diaphysis and metaphysis. Basically, it is an eccentric lesion, lytic lesion, expansile with thinning of the cortex, multiple peripheral bony ridges giving rise to subopal appearance. And there is no periosteal reaction. Microscopically, it shows uniform oval mononuclear cells with indistinct membrane, and there are osteoclasts like giant cells. This is the high power view of a giant cell, which shows 40 to 60 nuclei, which are situated in the central part of mononuclear stromal cells. In Langerhans type of giant cell, the nuclei are situated in the peripheral part. This is another specimen of giant cell of the distal radius. This is the clinical picture. This is the radiological picture showing the expansile lesion with subbubble appearance with breakage of cortex. This is the bone which is excised. Cut section shows multiple cystic degeneration, multiple cavities filled with the clotted blood and brown tissue. And this is the resection orthodesis was done using the ipsilateral fibular graft. These are the different types of treatment which are given in the textbook, but the most important is the denosumab. This question on denosumab may be asked in the examination. It limits the osteoclast maturation, inhibits the tumor-associated bone lysis. And what is the dose? 120 milligrams subcutaneously given once in a week for 4 weeks, and then every 4 weeks till you get a desired result. Now, coming to the benign bone tumors, the first is osteochondroma, which is also called as exostosis. This is the cartilaginous cap, and this is the osseous element or bony stalk. So this is the irregular cartilaginous and ossified bony swelling with stalk and surface and nodular. Age group is second and third decade. It starts in the metaphysis, but as the bone grows, it shifts to the diaphysis, and the growth stops when the bone of the growth of the bone stops. Radiologically, it could be peduncle or sessile. If it is sessile, it communicates with the medullary canal of the parent bone. There are 5 known complications: pain, pathological fracture, interference with the joint movements, neurovascular problems, and malignancy. Management: observation only if it is asymptomatic, resection if it is symptomatic. And these are the symptoms, 5 symptoms. This is another view of the osteochondroma. This is the X-ray. The X-ray is a specimen of osteochondroma. This is the intraoperative view, shows the lobulated tumor with a cap. This is the excised tissue, showing a nodular growth with the bluish cap. This is the cut section, which shows the osseous element. There are 3 commonly asked benign tumors. One is osteochondroma, second is osteoblastoma, and third is enchondroma. So osteochondroma shows cartilaginous cap with osseous bony top. In osteoblastoma, you see the small central nidus surrounded by the bony sclerosis. In enchondroma, there is a nodular gray-blue translucent lesions in the phalanx. Histopathologically or microscopic, in osteochondroma, you see the cartilaginous cap, mature chondrocytes, endochondral ossification, mature osteoblast, and bone marrow in the pedicle. In osteoblastoma, there is a small central nidus of woven bone rimmed by a single layer of osteoblast, surrounded by thick sclerotic bone. In enchondroma, there is a well-circumscribed hyaline cartilage, benign neoplastic chondrocytes. Radiologically, this is a radiological picture of osteochondroma, osteoblastoma, and enchondroma. Sometimes you may ask regarding differentiation of different conditions, different tumors of a hand, like giant cell tumor, enchondroma, brown tumor, or parathyroid, hyperparathyroid, or spina bifida, also called as tuberculosis dactylitis. So how do you differentiate? Histopathologically in GCT, you see the uniform oval mononuclear cells with osteoclast type of giant cells. In enchondroma, there are lobules of hyaline cartilage, endochondral ossification, and mainly you see the calcification. In brown tumor or tumor of hyperparathyroidism, you see the fibrous tissue, woven bone, and supporting vasculature. Picture of all these 4 conditions. In GCT, this arises from the proximal end of the proximal phalanx, showing the soap bubble appearance with expansile lesion. In endochondroma, again the lesion is eccentric expansile showing calcification. In brown tumor, it's a sharply defined round or oval radiolucent areas with may appear multilocular. In spina bifida, there is a fusiform dilatation of the bone with thin out cortex and destruction of the marrow space, leading to a balloon-like shape. The next is in a giant cell tumor of the tendon sheath. It's a circumscribed, lobulated, white, gray, brown, yellow-orange color with hemosiderin pigmentation. Microscopically, it shows mononuclear cells, which are epithelioid, then osteoclast like giant cell, then siderophages, and foam cells. The next specimen of aneurysmal bone cyst of proximal tibia. It shows expansile centrally located lesion in the proximal tibia. Cortex is thinned out. The content of the cyst is sponge-like, multiple blood-filled round cavities seen. Another specimen of aneurysmal bone cyst showing the spongy hemorrhagic mass covered by thin shell of reactive bone. Microscopically, there are cysts, septa lined by the fibroblast and histiocytes. There are clusters of osteoclasts like multinucleated giant cells. This is the X-ray appearance of a giant, anemia bone cyst, and the treatment is extended curettage with bone grafting. This is a simple bone cyst. I couldn't get the specimen, but this is the clinical picture of a swelling and pain in the proximal humerus. Radiologically, it shows a osteolytic expansal lesion with a fallen fragment sign, and this was treated with the intralesional steroid therapy. The next specimen of the loose body, it could be solitary or multiple with different shapes and sizes. And the X-ray picture shows the multiple radio-opaque loose bodies on the X-ray. The possible questions will be asked about who will define what are the types of loose bodies, what are the causes of loose bodies, and what is the management. So management is either removal by arthroscopy or orthotomy. The next specimen of synovial chondromatosis, which shows thickened synovium and multiple loose bodies. This is the X-ray picture, shows multiple loose bodies. This is the microscopy, shows the synovial cells showing metaplastic changes and chondrocytes. Clinically, patient has got picture of chronic synovitis with intermittent locking because of presence of loose bodies. And treatment is synovectomy, either arthroscopic or open. There are the next few specimens I'm going to show. Recently, I prepared this. I get an opportunity to do the amputation of these two patients. The first patient had a fractures of tibia fibula and supracondylar fractures. They were open fractures with sciatic nerve palsy, foot drop, and they were very badly contaminated with multiple laceration. On day one, we advised him amputation, but he was not feeling. So after that, we did so we did the amputation. These are the specimens which are prepared from the amputated leg. So this is the specimen which shows non-linear fractured tibia. It shows the, you can see the gap. You can see the implant also inside. Fibula is malunited. And what are the questions are likely to ask? What are the causes of non-linear? How do you define non-linear and delete linear? What are the types, different types of non-linear? What is the clinical picture, radiological features, and management, which I'm sure you must be familiar with all these questions. This is the specimen of the tibia. This is a fracture radiologically cleared and fixed with the plate. Now, what are the possible questions are likely to ask? Different approaches to fix this fracture, different types of implants. This is the supracondylar fracture, which is gone into margin fixed with the T plate. Actually, this is not the ideal plate for this fracture, but just to save the money, the surgeon used this plate because this patient was treated under government scheme. So likely questions are asked about causes, types of Mardian, clinical features, radiological features, and management. This is another Mardian of distal femur with fibular bone graft, which I personally did it. This patient had a gastrula type 3B open fracture of distal femur with bone loss. So on stage 1, we did the debridement and primary closure and applied the skeletal traction. After 2 weeks, I did the open reduction and fixed it with the plate and used the 2 fibular graft. This patient did very well for almost 3 years. After that, he developed peripheral vascular disease, for which we had to perform the above knee amputation. Now, this is the specimen probably of the century. Though there is a lot of advancements are going all over the world in different parts and different situations, but India in some parts still remains quite behind. This is the lady, 60 years old female, who is from a tribal area, which is a very remote part of Dhule district. She came with the gangrene of the foot in initial stage few months ago. We made a diagnosis of peripheral vascular disease and advised amputation. Her son was working somewhere in Mumbai, and patient himself refused the amputation. She went home. She stayed alone, and with medical pack and with herself, she removed all the skin, flesh from the leg, and this is the patient's situation. The medical pack referred the patient to the hospital again when she developed temperature and she went into septicemia. You can see there's an unhealthy pale granulation tissue. There's a white proximal fibula as well as tibia indicating that that part may be getting sequestrated. There's a slough and necrosed tissue. Part of the tibia looks vascular. This could be because of the intact nutrient artery blood supply. And there's a gangrene of the forefoot. This patient now underwent a bony amputation. Now, there are few slides which I'm going to show from microbiology department. These are important, especially for a candidate who are preparing for the MS examination. They may not be that important for DNB students or D-ortho students, because in practical exam of MS ortho, there's a separate section on spot of 60 marks, and one of the spot is of the slide, and the slides are taken from the microbiology department. So that's why I included these slides. The first one is of Clostridia tetani. You should know how to identify it. They are gram-positive bacilli. The anaerobic spores are terminal. They are Tinnick's racket or drumstick appearance. And then the possible question will be asked on the clinical features and treatment on tetanus. The next slide is of gas gangrene. These are again gram-positive bacilli. Here the spores are central osteoterminal. They are not terminal. And so once you make a diagnosis, clinically, you have to clinical features. The most important is the skin discoloration, skin blebs, subcutaneous crepitation, a very, very foul smelling. Once you smell it, you will never forget in your lifetime. And these are the various types of treatment can be done. Next slide is of gram-positive cocci. Mostly they're suggestive of Staphylococcus aureus. They are gram-positive cocci arranged in clusters. They are darkly stained, round, occurring in bunches like grapes. What are the characters? They are facultative anaerobes. They are non-motile, non-sporing forming. And these are the various drugs can be used to treat the Staphylococcus gram-positive Staphylococcus. Then these are the gram-negative bacilli. We cannot describe individually because they are diplococci, cocobacillus, bacilli, comma shaped. Each has got different appearance. The next is the acid fast bacilli. They're pinkish in color. They're non-motile, non-sporing forming, non-caffeinated bacilli. They're gram-positive but stained very poorly. And acid fastness is due to high lipid content. Sometimes in viva or even on the clinical or maybe on the table, examiner may ask you gram staining, procedure of gram staining or Chilman staining. You should be aware of this technique. Now, this is all about specimens and microbiology. If Dr. Shinde permits me, can I proceed for the osteology?
Sir,
Hello, Dr. Shinde, please.
Yes, sir. Jain, sir.
It depends on the energy of Yashwant Mahale, sir.
Sir, because
No, I am fully energetic. I will finish it.
I think, sir, we should finish because in just 40 minutes, he covered major topic. So it is just to 8:20. So we can have time for another 40 minutes, sir. You can go ahead, sir.
Okay.
Will that do okay with all faculty, sir?
Yes, I think Gopal, we can finish those, no problem.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
we are okay. We are okay.
Thank you, sir. Sir, Male, sir, please.
Okay. So in bones, when the bone is given to the candidate, he should hold that bone in a normal anatomical position. That is very important. Then he should identify the bone side, which side it belongs to. He should describe in general various parts of the bone. Examiner may ask you surgical or applied anatomy. And further questions obviously will depend upon the previous questions. Now again, examiner is very particular or naughty, he may ask you how to prepare the bone specimen. So after soft tissue dissection, separate the bone proper, because we did it recently, that's why I know this procedure. Clean the soft tissue with the scalpel. Immerse the bone in the 5% SCL for 24 hours. Then polish the bone with the glycerol. Dry in oven or sunlight for 24 to 48 hours. And apply boric acid powder for protection from the insects. So once you do this, the bones will remain as it is for years together. Now spine, we know that there are 33 vertebrae, 7 in the cervical, 12 in the thoracic, 5 in the lumbar, 5 in the sacral, and 4 costal vertebrae. Cervical vertebrae, C1, you can see there's an anterior arch, posterior arch, there is no body. And there's a foramen in the transverse process. In C2, also called as axis, there's a odontite process, also called as dens, that this odontite process represents the body of actually C1. And then the typical cervical vertebra shows spinous process, laminae, superior facet, inferior facet, transverse process showing the foramen for the passage of the vertebral artery. In thoracic vertebrae is slightly larger than the cervical vertebrae, but there are 2 facets to articulate with the rib cage. They are called as a costal facet for costal vertebral joint, and second is a facet for costal transverse facet for the costal vertebral joints. In lumbar vertebra, essentially the vertebra is large as compared to thoracic and cervical. There are no costal facets and there is no foramen in the transverse process. This is the differentiation between 3 vertebrae. In cervical, the foramen is present in the transverse process, and the directional facet is about 45 degree to transverse plane. In thoracic, there are presence of costal facets on the lateral surface of the vertebral body, and directional facet is 60 degree to transverse plane and 20 degree to frontal plane. In lumbar vertebrae, there are no foramen in the transverse process and there are no costal facets, but the directional facet is 90 degree in sagittal plane. Frequently questions on curvature, what are the movements are occurring in the various parts of spine, various deformities. Then examiner may ask you about various diseases like TV spine, traumatic fractures with paraplegia, without paraplegia, degenerative disease like spinal stenosis, spondylolisthesis, prolapse intervertebral disc, and sometimes on scoliosis also. As a student, you must know the pedicle screw entry points, how to pass a pedicle, because nowadays this is the very basic for all instrumentation of the spine, whether you are using the screw rod instrumentation or screw plate. Normally we are using the screw rod instrumentation, and these instrumentation are used to correct the scoliosis deformity, to fix the fracture spine, or sometimes to fix the degenerative spine, or also tuberculosis of the spine. In thoracic spine, how do you decide the entry points? There's a lateral border of the superior facet, the lateral border of the inferior facet, reach of pars interarticularis and transverse process. Entry point is just lateral and caudal to this intersection of all these 4 lines. In lumbar spine, you have to identify the pars interarticularis. This is pars interarticularis. This is mammillary process. This is the transverse process. So mid transverse process line, and this is the superior facet. So lateral border of the superior facet. So confluence of all these 4 lines is the entry point. Then these are the various steps regarding the screw fixation. You have to define the entry point, then open the cortex, create the pedicle tract. And how do you create? You have to give a craniocaudal angulation and mediolateral inclination. This is to prevent the cord damage. Then you do the probing, do the tapping, and insert the screw. The next bone is the scapula, which is a triangular bone showing various parts like acromion, coracoid process, glenoid cavity, supraspinous fossa, infraspinous fossa, suprascapular notch, and spinocerebellar notch. These notch they contain the suprascapular nerve and suprascapular blood vessels. The glenoid cavity, if you come to the glenoid cavity, there's a head of scapula and neck of scapula. Examiner may ask you on the Bankard's repair or various types of shoulder orthoplasty or anything regarding the recurrent distribution of the shoulder. So the next specimen is the clavicle. We have to go back to our first MBBS to find out what are the 7 peculiarities: horizontal bone, subcutaneous bone, first bone to ossify, long intramembranous ossification, 2 primary ossification center, no medullary cavity, and pierced by cutaneous nerves. There are important structures like subclavian vessels and brachial plexus. They lie underneath the clavicle. Examiner may ask you how would you treat the fractured clavicle by various techniques like broad arm sling, picker up with bandage, clavicle brace or strapping, or sometimes open reduction and fixation with the plate, especially when there is a associated neurovascular damage or open fractures or fracture with the wide displacement. You have to fix with the plate or you can use a threaded pin. This is the another view of a bone showing different muscle attachment. Then come to the humerus, which shows the head, lesser tubercle, greater tubercle, intertubercular groove, deltoid tuberosity where the deltoid muscle is attached. Then the coronoid fossa, trochlea, capitulum, lateral condyle, medial condyle, and the epicondyle. What are the frequently asked questions? Blood supply to the head of the humerus. Nerves in relation to the humerus. There is a 40-degree retroversion that is very important while doing the shoulder arthroplasty. There are various muscle attachment. Then the approaches to the shoulder joint. What is anatomical neck and what is surgical neck? And there are various parts, various relation of the brachial artery, median, radial, and ulnar nerve to the supracondylar region. And these are the nerves in relation. There are 3 important nerves. What is the posterior axillary nerve, which is situated posteromedial aspect of the neck of the humerus. Then the radial nerve, which is just behind the deltoid tuberosity. Then the ulnar nerve, which is present behind the medial epicondyle. These are the 3 important nerves. As far as the blood supply is concerned, there's a anterior humeral circumflex artery and the posterior circumflex humeral artery. They enter through the lesser and greater tuberosities, tubercle, and they supply the head. And that is the reason if you get a 4-part fracture, especially with dislocation of the head becomes avascular because the blood supply is totally cut off. These are the various muscle attachment. These are important from the especially trauma point of view. If you get a fracture of the 4-part fractures, so naturally the greater tuberosity will be shifted, displaced superiorly and posteriorly because of the pull of the supraspinatus. Lesser tuberosity will be shifted medially because of the pull of the subscapularis muscle. There are various approaches to the shoulder joint, but as a PG student, you should know 2 approaches in detail. One is the anterior intromedial approach, that's the anterior approach, or deltoid splitting approach. These are important for the fixation of the displaced fracture of the greater tubercle, or sometimes maybe with the open repair of the rotator cuff tear. Anterior approach is very important for fixation of the 4-part fracture or 3-part fracture or fracture neck humerus, sometimes to the open reduction of the dislocated shoulder. Then the proximal humerus fracture, you should know the Neal's classification: 1-part, 2-part, 3-part, 4-part, with or without dislocation, Evo classification. Conservative treatment is indicated when the fracture is not displaced. In operative, various implants are used. Currently, the Philos plating is the implant of choice. However, one can select multiple K-wire closed interlock nailing. This is newly coming up. I personally do with the screw wire technique, sometimes external fixator, or when there's a four-part fracture, dislocation of the head, one can consider hemiarthroplasty. When you say hemiarthroplasty, you should know these processes. That is a hemiarthroplasty, or sometimes total shoulder arthroplasty may be asked, or reverse shoulder arthroplasty. That can be asked in the examination. Coming down to the elbow, the popular or very interesting question is a terrible triad of elbow. You should know what is it. There's a dislocation of the elbow. There's a fracture of the coronoid process and fracture of the head of radius. So once you make a diagnosis of terrible triad, the treatment is essentially surgical, and there is a close reduction of the elbow. Radial head, either fix it or replace it. You should not do the excision. Coronoid process fracture is stabilized with the suture or maybe with the screw. Repair of lateral collateral ligament, and sometimes you may need repair of the medial collateral ligament. When it comes to the radius, there's a head of radius, neck, radial tuberosity, shaft, interosseous border, and styloid process of the radius. In radius, they frequently ask question about the relation of the posterior interosseous nerve and how do you protect it while exposing the proximal 1/3 of the radius. So if you are using the interior approach, what you should do, you identify the supinator muscle, go towards the ulnar border of the supinator muscle and cut the supinator muscle on the ulnar side and reflect the whole muscle laterally so that the posterior interosseous nerve is totally reflected laterally along with the supinator muscle. If you're using the dorsal approach, Thompson approach, you have to go at the lower border of the supinator muscle and then reflect the whole muscle subperiosteal. Or sometimes you may cut the muscle, identify the posterior interosseous nerve, and reflect it. In sensory branch of radial nerve is important from the surgery on the de Quervain's disease. So you must identify and protect the nerve. Otherwise, sometimes you may cut the nerve and you may do the beautiful and perfect release of de Quervain's, but the patient end up with the neuroma formation and complaining of the pain over the radial process. Distal radius fracture, there are various options of treatment that you should know: the close reduction and casting, external fixator, especially when the fracture is comminuted. If the fracture is unstable, you can do the multiple perictal spinning, and sometimes you may select the whole plating, dorsal plating, or combined plating. Then the ulna. Ulna has got a trochlear notch, coronoid process, olecranon process, radial notch, shaft, interosseous border, head, and styloid process. Two interesting questions, interesting topic where the question can be asked is a TFCC injury, that is a triangular fibrocartilage complex. And nowadays, a lot of interest is developed in this, especially by the hand surgeon. And if the patient has got symptoms, diagnosis made by the MRI scan, and surgery is usually done by the open rear or sometimes with the arthroscopic report. Coronoid process, the frequently asked question is about muscle attachment. We know only the brachialis, which is attached on the brachialis coronoid process, but there are other four muscles are also attached. Flexor digitorum superficialis is one head of coronoid teres, and flexor digitorum profundus and flexor pollicis longus also partly attached to the coronoid process. The other question will be asked on the surgical approaches. You can approach coronoid from the lateral approach, especially when the fracture head of radius is also present and you are excising the head of radius. So we can approach the coronoid process from the lateral side. You can approach from the medial side by splitting the flexor carpi ulnaris muscle. Then in carpal bones, the most important bone is the scaphoid. So the most important question will be asked about the blood supply. It comes from distal to proximal. That's why in fracture scaphoid, you are likely to get a avascular necrosis of the proximal port. As far as the blood supply is concerned, there's an anterior and volar and dorsal. Anterior is about 20 to 30%, and that is the palmar branch of the radial artery. In dorsally, the blood supply is about 70 to 80%, and that is the dorsal carpal branch of the radial artery. That's why if you want to do the open reduction or any surgery on the scaphoid, you should go through the Hollar approach so that the dorsal blood supply is preserved. Clinically, there's a fullness in the anatomical snub box and there's a tenderness of the snub box. If the X-rays, usually it does happen in initial cases, they are normal, but if you suspect clinically, you must confirm it by doing CT, MRI, or even bone scan. If the fracture is undisplaced, it can be treated with the scaphoid cast. If it is displaced, then you can fix it with the percutaneous screw fixation or open surgery with the Herbert screw. The next fracture in the hand is the Bennett's fracture, which is very popular. It's a fracture dislocation of the base of the first metacarpal, and instability is mainly because of the attachment of the adductor pollicis longus and adductor pollicis. The treatment is a close reduction with percutaneous fixation. Of course, you need a C-arm for this. Open reduction and fixation if the fracture is old, or sometimes you can treat it by distraction and external fixation. Then coming down to the lower limb, is the first specimen is the pelvis. There are two innominate bones containing ilium, ischium pubis, and posteriorly there is a sacrum. These are the various parts of the pelvic bone, which I'm not going to go into details. But if the pelvis is shown, certainly you will be asked on the pelvic fractures. So you must know the mechanism of injury. You should know Tiles and Young-Burgess classification. You should know the clinical features, and the most important is the pelvis compression test, blood at the tip of the urethra, or maybe some bruising around the genitals. Most of the time, the patient is brought in the profound hypovolemic shock, and you don't see any external injury. Chest and abdomen are normal clinically, but you must know that this could be because of the fractured pelvis. So pelvis compression test and hematoma, they are diagnostic signs. In emergency situation, only 3 X-rays are allowed. One is a lateral X-ray of cervical spine, AP X-ray of the chest, and third is the X-ray pelvis, that you should do it. If you want to confirm, then you should do the USG and CT scan. It is done once the patient is clinically stabilized. And how do you treat the patient? Emergency treatment resuscitation along according to ATLS guidelines with IV fluids and blood products. You do not hesitate to apply the external fixator in casualty, even under local anesthesia. That is one of the treatment of fracture pelvis. I did it personally and I saved the life of the patient. Sometimes you have to do the angiography and embolization of the bleeding vessels, or sometimes you have to do the open and do the pelvic packing, or very rarely you may have to go for the ligation of the internal iliac artery. Then the acetabulum, Judet and Letournel, they describe the 2-column concept, interior column and posterior column. This is the interior wall and anterior column white one, and posteriorly this is the posterior wall and the posterior column. And they have described this classification of fracture acetabulum. There are elementary fractures like posterior wall, posterior column, interior column, and transverse fracture. Associated fractures are posterior wall with posterior column, transverse posterior wall, T-shaped fracture, interior and posterior hemitransverse fracture, and both column fractures. So you have to decide these things by doing the 3D CT scan. Once you know the actual fracture geometry, then you can decide whether to fix only the posterior, interior, or both. For that, you must know the certain approaches. For anterior column and anterior wall fracture, you must know linguinal approach or iliofemoral approach. And if you want to expose the posterior part, you must know the Coker-Langenbeck approach in detail. As far as the hip is concerned, there are various approaches described in the textbooks, but you must know the 3 approaches. One is the posterior approach or southern approach, which is very, very popular approach. You must know the detail about this fracture that can be asked any surgery performed through the posterior, like total hip or any arthroplasty, anything. You must know the detail about this posterior approach. Smith-Peterson approach, yes, it's very rare. You have to do the sometimes orthotomy through the anterior approach. And other approach is a direct lateral approach. That is a Hardinger approach, which is very popular in UK. So those surgeons who are trained in UK, they are very familiar with this approach. Hardinger approach, many surgeons modified this approach according to their convenience, according to their difficulties. I personally modified this also, and I published that approach in the textbook of orthopedic surgery. In femur, there's a head, greater trochanter, lesser trochanter, neck, shaft, medial condyle, lateral condyle. And what are the frequently asked questions? Capsular attachment of the hip joint capsule to the trochanter. So anteriorly it is attached to along the intertrochanteric line. Posteriorly it is attached to the about 1 inch proximal. So that's why the basal fractures interiorly they are intracapsular, posteriorly they are extracapsular. Then the blood supply of the head, femoral anteversion is about 8 to 10 degree anteriorly. The question may be asked on the fracture neck of femur or intertrochanteric fractures. Question may be asked on avascular necrosis of the femoral head and about various muscle attachment. This is the blood supply of the head of the femur. There are three main supply. One is through the artery of ligamentum teres, through second is through the natant artery, but the main blood supply comes through the lateral and medial circumflex arteries. They form the retinacular vessels under the capsule, and they supply the main part of the head of the femur. Fracture shaft femur, obviously it is interlock nailing. You should know the detailed technique, detailed procedure. Then the next bone is the patella. This is the anterior surface of the patella, shows the apex. The posterior surface shows the lateral large facets, medial small facet, and medial is an odd facet. There are quadricep tendon attachment on the anterior side. There's attachment of the vastus lateralis and vastus medialis. And there's attachment of the ligamentum patelli near the apex. What are the frequently asked questions? What are the functions of the patella? This is the largest sesamoid bone. It protects the knee joint anteriorly. It maintains the extensor mechanism. And if you remove, for example, comminuted fracture of the patella, it can cause extensor lag. These are the various treatments of fracture patella. You may be asked on patellar tracking if you lead the examiner to the total knee replacement. Recently, patellar femoral instability is gaining a lot of interest, and you should know about it. Now, how to identify the site of the patella? If you see the previous slide, you know the apex and superior border. Laterally, there's a large facet, medial, there's a small facet. So you can identify by doing like this. But another way of identifying is that you identify the apex of the patella, point the apex away from you, put it on the flat surface. Whichever side the patella lands on will be the side where it is formed, just like right and left patella. The next bone is the tibia and fibula. So in tibia, there are various parts: tibial condyle, medial condyle, lateral condyle, tibial spine, shaft, and distal tibia, medial malleus, forming the ankle joint. What are the questions likely asked on the compartment syndrome of the leg that you should know how to make a diagnosis? And the most important is the pain is increased on dorsiflexion of the foot, on passive dorsiflexion. That is very, very important. There's a fullness swelling in the calf muscles. If you make a diagnosis, you should not wait for color Doppler or even dorsalis pedis artery to disappear. It's a clinical diagnosis. You should straightway go and do the fissure forming. In distal tibial fractures are usually known to go into delayed union and non-union. The reason is that uterine artery is torn at the fracture site. It comes from above downwards, and the distal fragment will have a less blood supply. There are no muscle attachment to the distal tibia. Fibula acts as a plane, and that prevents the coming into a position of the fracture fragment. That's why delayed union and non-union is really common in distal 1/3 fracture. In fracture tibia, you have a fracture of tibial spine. We can fix it with the arthroscope or maybe open surgery. Tibial plateau fractures, shaft of tibia fracture, tibial plafond fracture, and malleolar fracture. And what are the implants used in tibial condyle? LCP, small DCP, a rough plate, Ilizaro technique. In fracture tibia, you can do the interlock nailing, plating, or external fixation. Currently, proximal tibial fractures classification. You should know the Sasgar Evo classification, or Professor Hall, who recently lost from us, Hall and Moore's classification. And currently, all intra-articular fractures, they should undergo the 3D CT. So depending from the CT scan, the 4-column concept has come. So you have to decide the 4 columns and you approach accordingly, fix accordingly. So there are various approaches. You should know: anterolateral approach, medial approach, posteromedial, even posterolateral approach. If you want to fix the fracture from internally, nowadays we should use the anterior midline approach to fix the medial condyle or lateral condyle. Because if this patient needs future TCAP, it will be easy to perform to the anterior midline approach. Fibula. Now, how to identify the fibula? It's very interesting how to identify the side of the fibula. If you see the lower end, this is the facet for the talus, and this is the fossa. You put your thumb in the fossa, and the thumb perfectly fitting in the fossa. Suppose the right thumb fits into that fossa, the fibula is of the right side. If the left thumb fits perfect in the fossa, the fibula is from the left side. You should know the posterolateral approach of Henry to expose the posterior surface of the fibula, tibia, usually in the middle 2/3 of the fibula, tibia. Especially it is performed when the skin is not very good on the intromedial or introlateral side. You should know the longitudinal approach to the distal fibula also. What are the functions of the fibula? It's weight-bearing bone. It gives attachment to the various muscles. It can be used for bone grafting. However, distal 1/3 of the fibula must be live to maintain a stability of the ankle joint. You can use a vascularized fibula graft using the common peroneal artery and branches or non-vascular graft. Nerves in relation, the most important nerve is a common peroneal nerve. You may be asked the anatomy, how will you identify it while exposing the proximal 1/3 of the fibula. So basically, common peroneal nerves is dissected near the posteromedial border of the long head of bicep, and then it's stretched down and it goes and winds around the neck of the fibula. And at the neck of the fibula, it gives various branches: articular branch, tibialis anterior motor branch, deep peroneal and superficial nerve. This anatomy you must know, otherwise you will damage the nerve and patient will develop foot drop. In ankle joint, the most commonly question asked on the ankle injuries. So previously, Law-Hassan classification was very, very popular. Nowadays, Dennis Weber Evo classification is used. So depending upon that, you get a various fractures. In all type of examiners, they are familiar, very fond of asking these named fractures around the ankle joint, like Potts fracture, which is a bimalleolar fracture. Cotton's fracture is a trimalleolar fracture. Masonoff's fracture is a fracture of the proximal fibula, and damage to the inferior tibiofibular syndesmosis, damage to the deltoid ligament, or maybe fracture of medial malleus. Bosworth fracture is a fracture of the lower fibula, and the proximal end of the distal fragment is impacted behind the tibia. Dupuytren's fracture dystocia is another very popular fracture. It's basically a trimalleolar fracture, but the fracture fibula is at the lower 1/3. There's a injury to the inferior tibiofibular diastasis, and there could be a fracture of the medial malleus and deltoid ligament, and there's a posterior leaf fracture of the tibia. Tilak's fracture is the fracture of the interior end of the tibia. Runner's fracture is a stress fracture, which is seen commonly in the people who are doing running. It's a fracture of the lower third of stress fracture of the lower third of fibula. These fractures are seen on the X-rays and they are described accordingly. So you should know these name fractures around the ankle joint, because newer examiner may not ask you, but the old fashioned examiner, they are very fond of asking these fractures, and you should know the treatment accordingly. Then syndesmotic injury around the ankle joint, you should know how to fix it. So basically, squeeze should be positioned 2 to 3 centimeters proximal to the tibial plafond and directed parallel to the joint surface. It should be angled 30 degree anteriorly so that it is perpendicular to the tibiofibular joint. While inserting the screw, you should do the dorsiflexion of the ankle to prevent the post-operative limitation of motion. Fully threaded syndesmotic screw or lace screw should be used, and you should remove this syndesmotic
14
screw
days night.
before wet wearing. Otherwise, the patient will develop screw breakage. Then another fracture which is very popular is the posterior malleolar fracture, and you should know how to fix it. What are the indications? When the 25 to 30% of articular surface is involved, the displacement is more than 2 millimeters. There's or posterior subluxation of the talus, or when you want to restore the syndesmotic stability. And how do you do it? The commonly approach currently used is the posterolateral approach, either in the prone position or lateral position, which is very popularly done by the Kakatkar sir. I personally expose this fracture to the lateral approach because I am very fond of doing it. Sometimes, if you have a C-arm, you can do the close reduction and percutaneous fixation, passing interposterior lag screw or maybe posterior anterior lag screw. But while doing the from posterior anterior, you are likely to damage the peroneal vessels. The next coming bone is the talus, which shows the body of the talus, head, neck talus, lateral process, and posterior process. These are the various views of the talus are seen on this slide. This is the blood supply. Most of the blood supply comes through the neck of the talus from the anterior, it goes posteriorly. And that is the branches of the anterior tibial artery and perforating peroneal artery. This little blood supply comes from the posterior tibial artery. But when you get a fracture neck of talus, you can see here more openings there for the entry of the blood vessels. So if you get a fracture neck of talus, the body of the talus is likely to undergo avascular necrosis. There are no, sometimes examiners ask you, what are the muscle attachment of the talus? So your answer should be, there is no muscle attached to the ligament, attached to the talus. However, there are 5 important ligaments are attached to the talus, like deltoid ligament, tarsal sinus ligament, dorsal talonavicular ligament, posterior talofibular ligament, posterior talocarinaal ligament. Fracture neck talus, this Hawkins classification may be asked, and the treatment is conservative if it is really undisplaced. Operative, you should fix it with the 2 interfragmented law screw. You can use a headless screw or any screw. You can pass from the anterior to posterior, posterior to anterior. Or sometimes if you do the operative, you can fix it with the mini fragment plates. The next bone is the calcaneum. You can see the superiorly there is a posterior talar facet, middle articular facet, and interior facet. There is the articular surface of the cuboid. Laterally there is a peroneal trochlea. Posteriorly there is a tibial tuberosity. There is a groove for the peroneus longus tendon just behind the fibular trochlea. There is a sustendicular talus seen on the medial side. Sorry. Frequently asked question would be on the fractured calcaneum. Currently, a lot of interest by many foot and ankle surgery has developed, and general orthopedic surgeons are also taking interest in fixation of the fractured calcaneum. In the old days, all fractured calcaneum, whether they're intra-articular, extra-articular, displaced or non-displaced, all those were treated by non-operative methods with fairly good results. But nowadays, operative treatments come into the picture. All intra-articular fractures. How do you classify? This is the basic classification, historical classification given by the Essex Flopresti. Basically, there are 2 types: joint depression and tongue type of fracture. But the third classification is a CT based, coronal CT based Sanders classification. There are 4 types. So we have to do this and study the classification carefully to decide how to fix this fracture. So the treatment is a open reduction and internal fixation with the calcaneal plating on the lateral side, or close reduction and internal fixation with the multiple cannulated screws. Close reduction and percutaneous spinning, that is 6 Loftus tip technique. I personally do the open reduction fixation with the plating, and I presented this paper in one of the conferences in Mahabaleshwar, and I got the first prize. The paper is also published in the MOA journal. Then the question is like to ask about the tarsal tunnel and contents of the tarsal tunnel. The tarsal tunnel is basically there's a flexor reticular ligament which is attached to the medial malleolus and medial tubercle of the calcaneum. The tunnel is found just underneath. And what are the structure passing through? There are 3 tendons. One is a posterior tibial tendon. The second is a flexor digitum longus tendon. Third is the flexor hallucis longus tendon. There's a posterior tibial artery, an accompanying vein, and tibial nerve. Then the another question is likely to ask about sinus tarsi. What is this sinus tarsi? It is the space between the talus and calcaneum that is seen from the lateral side. And what are the contents? They may ask you. It contains the connective and adipose tissue, which has richly innervated with the mechanoreceptors and free nerve endings, and they are important for the proprioception. Then there's the attachment of the inferior reticulum. There's the attachment of the lateral cervical ligament. There's the attachment of the medial talocalcaneal interosseous ligament. There are few blood vessels. So these are the contents of the sinus tarsi. Examiner may ask you, especially when you say something about the triple orthodiscs. Then the next bone is the foot articulation. So there are about 26 bones. Dr. Gopak Kumar said in his lecture, there are 26 bones and there are so many ligaments are attached. So from the exam point of view, 2 injuries are very important. One is Lisfranc and second is Jones fracture. So this is the Lisfranc injury of the foot. Basically, it is a torsometatarsal fracture dislocation. There is a traumatic disruption between the articulation of the medial cuneiform and base of the second metatarsal. And there are 3 types. One is the homolateral, second is isolated, and third is divergent type. So most of the time these injuries are missed unless the attending orthopedic surgeon is aware of this type of injury. So if it is missed, the patient is end up with the painful foot. And then you have to make a diagnosis, late diagnosis with the MRI scan. If you diagnose earlier, the best treatment is operative. Fix it, open it, and fix it with the screw or Lisfranc plate fixation. That is the treatment. And then the last but not the least is the Jones fracture. So Jones fracture is basically described by Sir Robert Jones himself. Sustained this fracture while dancing with his wife in 1982. Who was Robert Jones? He was a nephew of Sir Hugh Owen Thomas. And sometimes we may ask if the examiner is interested in the British history, he may ask who was Sir Reginald Watson Jones. He was an apprentice under the Sir Robert Jones, and he was appointed as a orthopedic surgeon in British Navy. He did a lot of work, especially in the Second World War and First World War, and he wrote a very beautiful textbook on injuries and fractures and dislocation. When we were a resident, I'm sure Dr. Kakatka sir, Dr. Kanoja sir, they must be remembering this was the book to treat the fractures because it has given a very practical approach. Even today, I refer this book if I don't find appropriate treatment in Campbell or Rockwood. How do you treat the Jones fracture? Conservative treatment, you have to give a below knee cast with dorsiflexion and eversion for at least 6 weeks. If it doesn't unite, then you may have to go for the operative treatment, fix with the medullary 4.5 malleolar screw or even larger screw. I think that is the end of my talk. I'm sure you must have enjoyed it. I'm very sorry I could not cover all the specimens and all the bones. I do not know what type of bones or specimen would be kept for your examination. It depends where your examination will be conducted and what type of specimens bones would be available there. So basically, you should aware of basics of specimen microscopic structure, microscopy, various type of investigation and possible treatment. In bones also, you must know the applied anatomy. In bones, usually the question will be asked on the fracture management.
Thank
I
you,
think that is
sir.
the end of my talk. Thank you very much for patiently hearing.
Thank you, sir. You please stop sharing your screen, sir. I will request Samantha, sir, to start with. Samantha,
No,
sir.
I think sir has covered both the things. Whatever possible questions they usually we ask during the exam, he has nicely covered. If any student who has carefully listened to the talk for last 1 hour class, I think everything has been covered. If there is any doubt from the student's mind, we can take those questions then.
There is no question from student side, sir, yet. So thank you very much, sir. Today, sir, I will request Jayant, sir. Come in, sir.
अरे why comment? महाले सर ने इतना पढ़ा दिया, everything short.
Sir,
Nothing is
comments can be optimistic also, sir, with some encouraging also.
many. So it was elaborative talk. Almost everything has been covered. इसको एक बार और सुन लेंगे वाइवा के पहले. It's more than enough for us.
Right,
Okay, sir, I will do that.
Right, sir. Shivananda, sir.
Sir, it is an excellent talk and everything. I think within short span, sir has covered everything. There is no more things.
Uday Kumar, sir.
He's a tough examiner on this table.
Sir, highly exhaustive talk, sir. And Sir has
Uday Kumar
covered.
sir is a very tough examiner when it comes to this table, bones and specimen. He asks very difficult questions.
I
Thank
think
you,
students,
sir. Thank you,
students
Mahale,
should
sir, for a wonderful lecture, sir. Thank you, sir. Mahale, sir.
Male sir, from Joint's family side, I'm really thankful to you for clubbing both the classes in
In
one.
one.
Though it was very exhaustive, but you made it very simplified and it finished in time. As far as if today Kalra sir would have been
Kalra
there,
sir is
he would have been very happy. Before he says, "Mera petrol khatam ho gaya hai," you said thank you. So thank you very much for your clear, concise, crisp, and very beautiful images, especially the
that specimen of that lady, sir. It was ultimate. Huh? I have not seen
Yes,
such a.
Image of the century.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it
And
is
that
a specimen of the century.
I mean, specimen with plates,
Specimen of the century.
specimen of non-union. I have never seen, sir.
Yeah.
so
A
thank
wonderful
you very-
correction. Wonderful
thank-
correction. Kakatkar sir is there. Kakatkar sir is there. Sir,
uh,
Gopal sir.
yes, sir. Yes, sir. I am seeing, sir. Sir, Kakatkar, sir, please unmute, sir.
I think so. He's left.
नहीं मैंने देखा नहीं था सर को
बीच में आए थे. बीच में आए थे.
Kakatkar sir was there.
पैनल में नेम देखा रहे पैनल में नेम है.
There's a senior Dr. Goyal over here. I don't know if somebody can.
he is there, sir, but I am not aware कि whether sir is there or some student is there. That was actually confusing me.
No.
But
Goyal
he
sir
was
is
there.
there.
No, Goyal
Yes, sir,
sir,
he's there.
Goyal sir himself is there. I have seen his.
Sir. Goyal sir, kindly unmute yourself, sir. I think his sir is there. Goyal sir, please unmute yourself.
Unmute
Good
sir.
evening.
Unmute sir. Unmute sir.
Unmute, sir. Your side. Yeah. Sir, you just hold the space bar, or you can hold the space bar.
Unmute, sir, unmute. I think sir is muted.
No, he has to unmute himself now because Gopal has not muted from his side. Gopal, can you unmute from your side? Just
Sir, I can only request for unmuting. I tried, but he has to unmute, sir. I am not able to do that. I
okay.
am trying. I can only request him to unmute.
Okay. Yeah. Now he is unmuted. Yes, sir. Now we can listen to you, sir.
Sir,
Yeah.
Goel sir, speak, sir.
Yes, sir. I am Dr. Goel.
Yes, sir. Your views on today's class, sir.
Sir, today's class was excellent. And subject, every topic and every item, every slide was good. And audio video was again very excellent.
Sir, as regards exam, some few tips to the students from your side regarding today's topic, sir, related to exam.
Yes, for exam purposes, it is also very, very useful. And student will be liking this topic.
Thank you very much, sir.
So-
Jain, sir.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Jayant is going to, you are asking for Jayant, yeah.
I think I'm not able to.
No,
Sir,
Jayant,
sir, I think he has left, or I don't know. Samantha, sir, you please
Jayant is
conclude today's session, sir. If Jain, sir, is there.
Jayant is there. I can see his video. Jayant, you are muted.
I have been
Yes, sir.
muted by Gopal.
Sorry, sir. गोयल सर को अनम्यूट करने के इसमें ऊपर नीचे हुआ होगा सर, सॉरी
Okay.
सर. बोलिए
Hi.
सर. जैन सर, we can conclude today's session, and
Yeah,
I
we
want-
can conclude.
Yes, sir.
Just one thing I want to tell the students that whatever surgery they are going to attend in the OT, go and read the bone of that. You'll never forget the soft tissue attachments of that bone and approach. That way, one bone during your PG training would be covered. Like if you're going for a fracture of neck or femur, read the approach, Cocker Langenbeck, what muscles are going to be encountered, you're going to encounter, what are the different bursas, how do you stitch the lateral rotators. These are common questions that are asked. So just before going in for a surgery, if you read this single bone, I think so by end of your 1 year, you will be able to remember every bone. You don't have to mug up at the end of your session.
Yes, Uday Kumar sir.
Sir, one last question. Sir, Mahale sir. Sir, what did you do for that specimen of the century? You shown that specimen. Did you do
Amputated.
Yavoni amputation or?
Yeah, above knee amputation.
Yes,
is
this
there.
Aboni amputation.
Okay, sir. Okay.
There's one question in the chat box. Sota hai, abhi utha hai. Repeat fibula which sided using the thumb.
You hold the fibula, find out the lower end of the fibula. There is a one facet for the articulation with the talus, and just behind that facet there is a fossa. So you try to fit your thumb in the fossa. If the right-sided thumb fits snugly and properly, it is right-sided fibula. If left-sided thumb fits nicely in that fossa, it is a left-sided.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much, sir. Samantha, sir, I want
I-
you to conclude with your remarks, sir. Today's session conclusion with your remarks, sir.
I think the specimen and the X-ray, these are all very important during the exam. Just 1 second. So I think they have to follow the basic what Mahale sir started with, like when you describe your specimen, always start from the periphery to center, the appearance and how the formalin and how it is preserved. The basic questions are asked. Rest I think is all theory. So there is a protocol for answering for these specimens. Okay, and also the main bones, don't forget, like your the long bones, and also especially the scaphoid, the the talus, the calcaneum, all these should not be forgotten. Okay. So I think Mahalay sir, whatever, if you just listen to this lecture next time, I think nobody is going to forget these things.
Thank you very much, sir. With your permission, Samantha sir, may I conclude today's